California is the most complicated water supply system, arguably in the world. It's evolved over the last 150 years. We move water vast distances in California. I mean, really, it's extraordinary, this system, the sophistication of this system. It's how we can survive in a place where it stops raining at the end of April and doesn't rain until sometime in the fall. So it really is, and then we have occasional droughts. However, we do not get a drop of water from Canada or Oregon for that matter. I mean, our nearest neighbor. We do get some water out of the Colorado River, but we take it out of the Colorado River in California. So really, we're a self-sufficient, self-contained state, which actually makes us a little unique in the West. So the thing to remember again is these thousands of miles of canals and 1,500 dams and then massive groundwater basins are part of our storage and conveyance system. So here in Northern California, we're very reliant on the Sierra Nevada, and the Cascade Range to the north, Mount Shasta. That's where the bulk of the water comes from in the Central Valley, where we are. Some of it goes to the Bay Area, but the Bay Area has some of its own local supplies. And then a chunk of water goes all the way to Southern California. So the State Water Project will deliver water all the way into the LA basin. And that actually makes up in typical years a quarter to a third of their supply. So it's not all of their supply, but it is shipped vast distances. That's the key thing to remember, and actually pumped over the Tehachapi's and into that basin. So they do not have the precipitation in Southern California to maintain their existing population and demand. So they have to rely on imports from other places. Northern California in particular, sending that water down, and then also water off the Colorado River. So without that, LA really couldn't survive. Well, last week's executive order had within it the kernel of a good policy debate. And that is there a way to operate the Central Valley project, that is the federal project, in a way which is much more flexible? It takes advantage of wetter periods, for example, puts more water down to farms. That's the roots of a good debate. However, the basis of the executive order was somehow connected to fires in Southern California. And the federal government does not deliver any water to Southern California. They only deliver it as far south as the southern San Joaquin Valley. So that was very confusing to many people, and it's a detail and missed. But the roots of it are a good policy debate. So as far as I understand, the Army Corps of Engineers, which operates several large dams in what's called the Tulare Basin, which is the very southern end of the San Joaquin Valley. And by the way, the Tulare Basin is named a basin for a good reason. It's a basin. Water doesn't make it to the ocean out of the Tulare Basin except in extreme years, and it's all farms, and that's where the water goes. Well, almost all farms, and that's where the water goes, is principally for irrigation of farms. So when the Army Corps of Engineers started doing what, in my view, would be the equivalent of emergency releases from two of these dams, which would have filled the channels downstream, that's what you do when you are very worried about the stability of your reservoir in a very, very large storm. But that's not the case down there. That part of the watershed. I mean, the Southern Sierras has been very dry this year, so they have to be worried to hang on to as much water as they can in their reservoirs, and then use it for irrigation in the summer. But instead, this water ran down the channels below the dams and out into the fields where nobody's growing any crops, nobody's irrigating anything. So it was a mystery to all of us who looked at it, because not a drop of that water will make it to Southern California, not one drop. And in fact, it arrived when it was least needed. So I'd like to say I think we're just in the early days of the new administration, and they're still figuring stuff out. And hopefully when they do this again, they'll ask questions. Certainly ask questions of the locals. They can tell you whether this is a good idea or not. Well, there's no place on the planet with unlimited water except the ocean. I'm not quite sure where that's coming from. We're actually a quite water limited state. And we are, I mean, although we have abundant water in far northern California and have developed elaborate systems to move it from north to south, we're characterized by occasional severe drought, an increasingly severe drought. That's a great limitation. And then we have to protect our environment because that's what the law says. And so that is another limitation. So I just don't. There's no limitless water that anybody can even point to in California. And also, we have such a highly constrained system here. There are a lot of straws in the glass. Um, you can't just find a silver bullet solution which would suddenly unleash massive amounts of water. There's just not. There's not that kind of thing available. It's always little bits around the edges that you can manage better, which we have been doing a very good job, particularly in our cities, the last 20 or 30 years. But now I don't see lots and lots of new water.